The Lord of the Rings is many things, but it is essentially a story of friendship. One of the three Lord of the Rings is the Fellowship of the Ring. So, one of the famous scenes from the book is Gandalf leading the Fellowship into the Mines of Moria, but he's stumped at a door that is sealed magically and can only open with a secret password. And the riddle at the top of the door says, "Speak, friend, and enter." And Gandalf assumes that this is some puzzle, some riddle, and so he needs to know the magical word that only friends know, only people on the inside knows. But he can't open the door, and of course, the simple answer is that he just needs to say the word friend, and then the door will open. And that's actually that's a wonderful picture of Tolkien's view of friendship that actually permeates the whole of the story. The whole of the story is filled with tension and suffering. It's filled with a lot of animosity between characters. You can think of Legolas and Gimli. They hate each other at the beginning. You can think of Aragorn and Boromir. They hate each other at the beginning. All of those relationships, though, by the end, either when a character dies or at the conclusion of the story, become resolved and reconciled. And of course, the ultimate picture of friendship is Sam and Frodo. The beauty of the story of the Lord of the Rings is that an incredible thing is done. Mordor is defeated. But this incredible thing is done through the most ordinary means possible. Defenseless, small little hobbits who, by the sheer power of their friendship, are able to overcome every difficulty and win the day. That's a great metaphor for what we need today. What faces a Christian today is insurmountable. It can seem like you're up against Sauron and the forces of Mordor. And so it may seem like what we need is an equally formidable weapon to fight against that. When I think the thing that the church needs the most is to recover the simple goodness of the Shire and friendship. And so that's what we want to talk about with these classes and with this lesson. Oh, Elliot needs a friend right now. That's what he needs. Okay. All right, why are we talking about this? Why are we trying to convince you to come here on Wednesday nights to talk about friendship? 3 reasons. 1, everybody is lonely. And at first, when I wrote this out, I had a bunch of statistics to give you, but then I thought, I don't even think I need to prove this. I think you already know this. I don't need to tell you suicide rates and anxiety and depression rates and whatnot. It's an established fact. And when I say everyone is lonely, I mean young people, old people, men, women, if you're married, if you're single, everyone today, statistically, in America in particular, is reporting higher rates of loneliness, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation now more than any other generation that we have on record, which is saying something. But I don't just mean that necessarily in a big way. I also mean that just talking about our church. All of you are lonely. Loneliness has crept into everything. And I've done enough conversations with people to know that everyone feels like, man, something's off. It shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't feel this kind of level of difficulty when it comes to relationships, this kind of hardship. So the person that you think has a million friends, is on the inner ring, that person feels like they're on the outside. Everybody feels lonely. Some of the contributing things that contribute to this: wealth, technology, mobility, and therapy. Really briefly, irresponsibly, I'm going to run through those very fast. We're richer now than we ever have been before. And that means that we're less dependent on other people. You can hire someone to come help you with something. You don't need the help of other people. You can ask, but it's just more convenient a lot of times to take care of problems yourself. Hire a handyman, deal with the problem yourself. You don't need help. And that kind of creates a strange sort of isolation. I've shared this story before, but in the neighborhood that my wife and I lived in Kentucky was a very poor neighborhood. And no one had garages. And some people on our streets didn't have air conditioning. And so when you parked your car, it was just in the driveway. So just getting out of your car typically required you to see other people, because people who didn't have air conditioning usually were sitting out in front of their house. And there was just 1,000 tiny little connections that you would make. Like when you live in a tiny house and it's hot, and you don't have a garage to park your car in, it was just more common to be outside. I'm guessing everyone in this room has air conditioning in their home. Most of you, likely, a good majority of you, probably have a garage that you park your car in. And so it's totally doable for you to come home, open your garage door, drive your car in, close the garage door, and go and spend the rest of the night inside in your home and never see the people that you live on the street with. It was a strange experience when we moved from Kentucky back here, and the neighborhood that we moved into, it was like this alien experience where we live alone together in the suburb. That's probably true for many of you. Technology, technology has flattened the human experience and given us an incredible wealth of conveniences that just make life easy and entertaining and easy to be distracted. And so you don't need people anymore. And interacting with people involves friction and difficulty. And if you can just squish all of that into a screen and it smooths it out, it just makes it easier. We're more mobile now than we ever have been before. You have probably moved at some point in your life, probably multiple times in your life. The idea of staying in one place and living there for your whole life is now the odd thing. And really the dream and the goal for most young people is to move away. And you maybe spend 2 or 3 years in one place and then move on to somewhere else and then move on to somewhere else. And nobody thinks that's weird. Nobody thinks that's strange or something that you should think about. Is it good for you to live in one place for 2 years and then move somewhere else for another 2 years? That there are real consequences that come relationally when you do that over and over again. And lastly, we live in a therapeutic age where all of the attention is focused internally on how we feel. Relationships are really hard and are demanding. And if you kind of are in the crock pot of that therapeutic worldview where you are evaluating all of your experiences and opportunities and relationships in regards to how they make you feel, then you may, as soon as a relationship makes you no longer feel good or it becomes difficult or you hit a dry spot, you'll just stop putting as much effort and intentionality into it. And because at one point or another, all relationships hit those tough spots, you may find yourself lopping relationships off only to have a bare tree at the end of your life. Okay. Everyone is lonely. 2, friendship is not a luxury, but a necessity. The reason why I want to talk about this is because there are real consequences when we live a life where friendship is viewed as the whipped cream on top of our life, when it's viewed as the leather on the seats and less like the oil in the engine. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Four Loves, says that friendship today is something quite marginal, not a main course in life's banquet, but a diversion. Something that fills up the chinks of one's time. How has this come about? Well, the first and most obvious answer is that few value it because few experience it. And this becomes more true the older you get. But 3, the reason we're talking about this is because Christianity uniquely has a wealth of resources to answer these problems. And sometimes, I think, we can be people who are going through this kind of epidemic of loneliness and relational disconnect, like parched travelers going through the Sahara Valley, all the while we have backpacks full of water, but we just forgot that we have them. There are many resources we have in our Christian faith that meet these needs, questions, and challenges head on. We just often kind of forget about it and treat it as peripheral because we've been so influenced by this kind of anti-relational world that we live in. Okay, that's me trying to just pull you in with a big need. Now, let's think about what are the resources that our faith offers us for thinking about friendship in particular. Okay, let's start with a really big question. What is ultimate reality? Before the Big Bang occurred, what was there? According to Christianity, ultimate reality is not a void, it's not nothingness, it is not matter, it is not power, or even raw rationality, like a mind. Ultimate reality is personal, relational, and love. Because before anything existed, God existed as the triune being, three persons in one. So the most fundamental, essential, brute fact of existence is relationship. God existing within a relationship in himself. We are made in that God's image. And that means that we are irreducibly relational beings. Relationships are not just expressions of power or people trying to get things from other people, because at the end of the day, ultimate reality is really just about force and power, people exploiting one another. No, the bedrock of our existence is love. And that's why we find within ourselves this ineluctable draw towards relationships. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or whatever, you long for that. And we are made in that God's image, which means that we are made to be in relationship with others. So human beings are social creatures because the God that we are made in the image of is social himself. And that's why, before sin enters the world, the first problem that's ever described is that mankind is alone. It is not good that man is alone. God has made us to commune with him and to commune with each other. In the Garden of Eden, we see God communing with Adam and Eve. He walks in the garden with them. To walk with God is a metaphor used throughout the Bible to have it's not literal walking. It's meant to communicate this kind of idea of a companionship. You could think of Enoch is described as one who walks with God, or Noah walks with God. In the tabernacle itself, God said that he would walk there with his people. It just means that he's relating to them. So think about this. It could have been totally possible for God to just make all of us, but then to stand back like some scientists watching a bunch of lab mice. Just observe, but never relate at all. How strange would it be for a scientist to, get down and start naming the mice and talking to them and trying to form a relationship with the mice? That's something very wrong with that scientist. But God, when he creates us, does that very thing. He stoops down to commune. And because we're made in his image and God desires to commune with us, we therefore commune with each other in relationship. And that can look like many things. Of course, with Adam and Eve, that was a marriage. There was a romantic connection they had there, and then that creates a family. So we have romantic love, there's familial love. But today, we're here to talk about friendship in particular. And why is friendship unique? Here's what C.S. Lewis says. Friendship is the least natural of loves. It's the least instinctive, organic, biological, gregarious, and necessary. This alone of all the loves seems to raise you to the level of gods or angels. What does Lewis mean by that? human society could continue to propagate and exist if we never were friends with anyone. If you just found a mate and you had children and then you had a family, we could continue to exist, right? And so that would work. Friendship is luxurious in that sense that it is not biological. You don't have this, instinct to, pass on your genetic material in the way that you may be driven towards romantic love or familial love. Like when you have a friend in your life, you don't, in a sense, you're not trying to get something out of them, right? You're not looking for a partner or, you're not looking for an obedient child. It's luxurious in that sense. That's Lewis's point. But that's a perfect picture, though, of the kind of relationship that our God comes to us with. When God seeks a companionship with us, a relationship with us, it's not out of any need that he has. It's just sheer delight. It's just this sheer freedom he has in wanting to share and to give. Okay, that is the Magna Carta, the bedrock of why we find within ourselves this big desire to seek out friendship. But friendship's really difficult. Something went wrong. And of course, that's sin. Augustine described sin as man curved in on himself. That's what sin does to a human being. It's like you were meant to be a mirror, reflecting God, outward looking, and then sin was like a hammer that just came in and it bends a human in on himself. So that now as you think and feel and imagine, it is, you don't even have to try. You think about yourself. You think about how you look, how you sound, what is going to happen to you, what opportunities this affords to you. Because now you are someone who, though made in God's image, are really just focused in on yourself. And because you're made in God's image, but sin warps that means that sin is inherently anti-social. We are so busy focusing on ourselves that we fail to focus on God or others. So there are many things, right? The things I ticked off before, wealth, technology, whatever, that makes relationships difficult. But the root of it is sin. That's what makes it difficult. Sin drives us away from each other. And that can be true even if you have a lot of friends. You can be the cool kid in class. You can have, a billion friends, it seems like, yet be very alone. Proverbs tells us that a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. You can have many companions but not have a friend. How? Well, sin uses people. It uses people or it pushes people away. It does not enjoy or love others. It does not invite them into your life. It pushes them away. And so this is our problem. Okay, so wherever you are on the Myers-Briggs personality scale, the extrovert-introvert scale, whatever you have in your mind is like, oh, well, this fills my social battery. This drains my social battery. These are the particular difficulties for me and my story and my personality that makes relationships hard. Totally, okay, granted. Still, the thing that makes relationships hard for you is sin. That's the root issue. When Adam and Eve sin, right, you know the story, they hide. They hide from each other, and they hide from God. This is what sin does. It makes us recoil in on ourselves, push people away. So what does God do in response? Okay, now this is where I'm gonna bring in the theme of these talks is all on friendship and hospitality. Now, friendship, I'm saying, is the relationship that God designed you to have with Him and with others. Hospitality, I'm going to argue, is friendship on mission. Hospitality is taking that good design into a broken world and seeking to restore it. Okay? Does that make sense? God has a plan to restore what's wrong. Hospitality comes from two Greek words mushed together, phileo, which means love, and xenos, which means stranger. So hospitality is to love someone who's a stranger, or love someone who is estranged, an alien, an outsider. That's what hospitality means. Typically, that's used in the Bible to refer to providing food or shelter to those who are in need, opening your table and your home with a warm welcome. God has a plan to love those who have been estranged from him. And the story of the Bible is God coming to those who he made to be in communion with him, but who have now become strangers, and then providing and pursuing to bring restoration. That's what he does from day one. And if you pay attention throughout the Bible, you will notice a strange theme of God sharing food with people. This is a part where sometimes the Bible's weird, and if you lean into the weirdness, you find cool things. Okay, let's just run this down. This happens first with the story of Abraham in Genesis 18, where the Lord shows up, and Abraham sees the Lord, and it's the word Yahweh. Yahweh is there, and Abraham immediately says, "Let's have a meal." And God says, "Okay." And that's where God promises Abraham that he's going to have a child. Sarah's going to give birth to Isaac soon. But what a strange thing. If God showed up right now, would your first thought be, let's fry up some pork chops and open a nice bottle of wine? And what a strange thing. In Exodus 24, right after God has delivered the Sinai covenant, God summons Moses and Aaron and 70 of the elders of Israel to come up to the mountain, and we're told that they see God, and then they eat with God. Just there. And I mean, if you've never read this, read Exodus 24, verses 8 through 10. It seems like just such a bizarre thing thrown in there. Beholding God, they just sit and have a meal. I think of David's language in Psalm 23, speaking about the goodness and mercy of God as his shepherd, who prepares a table for him in the presence of his enemies. Or just think of all of the temple sacrifices, which are filled with all of these food images. Well, not just images, but actual food. Grain offerings, meat offerings. There's bread permanently and perpetually in the temple at all times. And that points us forward to God in the flesh. When Jesus came, he was accused like this in Matthew 11:19. The Son of Man came, eating and drinking, and they say, "Look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds." Here's an interesting, none of you are going to do this. Never mind. This is a weird request. I was going to say, you could read all four Gospels and pay attention to what Jesus does more than anything. That's a big task, so yeah. Take my word for it. Strangely, one thing, aside from teaching, that Jesus does more than anything is eat. And when you think about the details that are provided for us in the Gospels, it's amazing what we don't know. We don't know what Jesus was like as a teenager. We don't know what he was like in his 20s. Well, I mean, if you could put like a stop clock going, like in the amount of like actual time we have recorded in the Gospels, it is a vanishingly thin amount of time for the Son of God. So everything that is included in the narratives is very intentional and carefully selected. And so why, and if you want, you could look at the notes, I've listed out everything there. Why is there just reams and reams of data about Jesus having meals and eating with people? Why is the first miracle that he performs to reveal his glory creating wine at a wedding? Golly, you could have done something so much more significant and important, couldn't you? You just saved a young couple from being embarrassed because they ran out of wine. Jesus eats with sinners and tax collectors. He eats with his disciples. He eats with Pharisees. He eats with the crowds. He eats with women. He eats with Zacchaeus. He eats with lepers. He eats with Lazarus. And he eats with his disciples in the Last Supper and after he resurrects, on the road to Emmaus, and on the beach. Over and over again, we are told that Jesus eats. He eats so much that he has gained a reputation, as Matthew 11 tells us, as being a glutton and a drunkard. The Lord's Supper, of course, is the most important of all those meals. So we could just say, why are we told so much about Jesus eating? Another question we could ask is, why, of the two ordinances that Jesus could leave us, why is one of them a meal? Jesus tells us, take and eat, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant. That's pulled right out of Exodus 24, that exact phrase, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Not only is one of the sacraments that he leaves us this meal, but he then shoots it forward like a time capsule into the future. Every time we take the Lord's Supper, you should think about the last day. Why? Because something's coming at the last day, which is the next point. The wedding supper of the Lamb. Heaven, repeatedly throughout the Bible, is described like the best meal you will ever have. A meal that Isaiah tells us is a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, not cheap wine, good wine, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine, well refined. Revelation 19, the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. At the conclusion of history, when God is about to remake everything, he kicks it all off with a big feast. Okay, why are we told so much about Jesus eating? Why is one of the sacraments a meal? Why is heaven begun to the sound of wedding bells, and rich wine and good food? Why? Table fellowship, sharing food, opening your table up and opening your home up to others is all about relationships. You've probably heard this before, but in the Bible, to share a meal with someone was a lot more than just feeding them. It was saying, you matter. I want a relationship with you. And that's why it was so scandalous that Jesus ate with tax collectors and sinners. The point of all of the meals is to communicate God's desire to commune with us. More importantly, it's pointing to God's desire to be your friend. And I wonder if do you ever think about God that way? Or if so, does that seem quaint, sweet, trite? Jesus is my friend. Oh, that feels so fluffy and ephemeral. But Jesus as Lord and King and Master, oh yeah, that has some power to it. We like that. I wonder if our eye rolls at Jesus being our friend reveals much more about how relationally starved we are than about anything that is actually lacking in the concept of Jesus being a friend. Jesus, in fact, defines the epitome of love in regards to friendship. John 15, verse 13, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from the Father, I have made known to you. Jesus has come as God's hospitality mission to take strangers and aliens who ruptured their relationship with him and to bring restoration through sharing a meal with him, his broken body and shed blood. Every time we come to the Lord's table, we are coming to the Lord's table. He is practicing hospitality to us by welcoming us, we who are strangers, into his family. This is why the early church was so devoted to the practice of hospitality. Read Acts 2 now with all of that in your mind. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. The church has received the hospitality of God through the ministry of Jesus Christ, and that now fills them up to overflow and extending it out. And that looks like hospitality that is focused at the church and outside of the church. 1 Peter 4:9 says, show hospitality to one another. So remember that phrase hospitality, it means the love of stranger. But here Peter says, do that to each other. So it's not like love, you can only show hospitality to people you don't know. But rather, it should be applied, just like we saw in Acts 2. The church was gathering together day by day, breaking bread in their homes, enjoying one another. We should show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Contribute to the needs of saints, Paul writes in Romans 12, and seek to show hospitality. We should focus our hospitality inward, and we should focus our hospitality outward. Jesus told us in his parable of the sheep and goats that those who are the most likely to be ignored and passed by, the poor, the hungry, the outsider. If you treat those individuals with the love and mercy of God, Jesus says it's like you're treating me that way. He says, for I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Or more simply, Hebrews tells us, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. So the church should have a focus inward on showing hospitality to each other and a focus outward, taking care and welcoming in those who cannot, who may not be able to provide for themselves, for those who lack the abilities that maybe others have. You can think of Jesus' parable where he commands his followers to invite people over to your home who cannot invite you back over to their home. Right? Don't only invite people over to your home who are going to return the favor. And we should show it to strangers because, goodness, they might be angels. What does that mean? I do not know. But, okay. Here's the big idea. Friendship is not peripheral. It is what you were made for. Ultimate reality is relational. And if you put yourself in such a place where relationships just do not happen for you, then you are out of step with the design of God. You are a car that is trying to use Mountain Dew as your fuel. It just will not work. Friendship with God and friendship with one another is what you were made for. Sin has made friendship very hard. Sin is antisocial. And you know that to be true because when you sin, you typically want to push people away. Or you switch into fake mode and there's a different version of you that suddenly pops out. You're not honest. You're not open. There's just a different you on display. We do not accidentally drift into relationship. Hospitality is friendship on mission. If we want to restore that blueprint and design, that means that we need to be willing to reach out and lean in to embrace this mission and cultivate and create that relationship through our warm welcome. But we can do that because Jesus' life and ministry has shown us what this looks like by how he has welcomed us. You can think of Romans 15:7, where Paul tells the Roman church, welcome one another just as Christ has welcomed you. The church is meant to be a place where friendship is cultivated and hospitality, both in and out, is practiced. The church is meant to be the place where you can speak friend and enter. There is no secret passcode. There is no magic that you need. If you come and you are willing to be a friend with the friend of sinners, you have a place here. So, this talk was supposed to be like the theology of friendship and hospitality. It was big, high level, okay. That doesn't leave you with a lot of practical help or advice right now, but it wasn't meant to be. But if you find yourself, though, right now at a place where you're I'm not really happy with the level of my relationships in my life, with my friendships. I would like my friendships to be better. Let me give you a couple of practical tips. One, attend all of these meetings. Right? That's simple, okay? Two, as you start thinking about trying to grow in your practice of friendship, be prepared for realizing that you're not as good of a friend as you thought you were. You may have been hiding behind a bunch of assumptions that all of your other friends are bad friends. And as you start to think about this more, you may suddenly realize that you are actually not a very good friend. I have never met anyone who has not yet thought that thought once they start doing this. So just accept it now. Let's all just admit we're all bad friends, okay? Okay, let's clear the air. We're all at ground zero, okay? We can all feel bad, and then we can start over. Third thing you can do, adopt a posture of just leaning into this, guys. You all are different people with different lives, different personalities, different schedules. There are different things that are going on that make relationships hard, that are different for all of us. But if we can all adopt a posture that leans into this, some real change can happen. The biggest problem is that many of us lean away. People have to overcome something to start a relationship with us. And so that can look like 1,000 little things, like not just being on your phone when you're in a room with other people. Because most of us pull our phones out just because we feel uncomfortable and we don't know what to do. And you just flick through your email. You don't need to flick through your email, but you look like you're doing something important. Right? Or having a conversation with someone, or even if an interaction feels like, that felt a little weird, that, relational sparks didn't clash, we're not best friends all of a sudden. Not saying that relationship is pointless. If everyone in this room, if everyone in our church, pray that our church gets their butts here, okay? Do that. If everyone in our church has a posture of leaning in, because we will create an oasis here in a desert. We are in a desert. Everyone is lonely. And there are heartbreaking consequences, especially for young people. I know relationships get harder as you get older. That's just a reality of life. Because young people are having more difficulty creating relationships now than older people are. It's the first time that's ever happened. But if we all lean in, and through our willingness to overlook offenses and to wade through awkward conversations and to keep seeing the best in someone else and trying to find common ground and asking thoughtless questions, we can create a vine of life that is thick enough that maybe some of these other weaker vines can be grafted into. And we can create something here that will bring life to so many people who need it. I need it. We all need it. Okay, so that's what we want to do as a church. We are creating a covenant community who worships Christ above all. So let's not just let community be a Christian tagline, but be a real goal that we're aiming at. Okay, and in the weeks to come, we want to get much more practical. Next week, George Booth is actually going to be teaching on what makes this particularly hard and inconvenient. The week after that, I'll talk a lot more practically about how to make friends. And yeah, we'll just keep leaning into more of the nuts and bolts of practicality. But yeah. Okay, that's it. A few minutes. If there's any questions at all, anyone wants to ask, I'd be happy to. Try.
So much a question, but I would just add to make assumptions. I see tons of people make assumptions about they text someone, they don't hear back from them, or they call, or really anything it seems like. Or we've had in the past, we've assumed about friends, and it turned out they had something tragic going on or some unforeseen thing that we didn't think about.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if we not only did we try to we're gonna be a church that leans into relationships, but if we also fused 1 Corinthians 13 onto that, and we kept that going we're gonna assume the best in people, we're gonna be patient and kind and tenderhearted and all those things.
You have some examples of showing hospitality, especially centered around the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak to some biblical encouragements or examples of hospitality that aren't that? Like I'm thinking of maybe younger people in our church who don't own a home they can invite people to, or
Yeah.
different schedules, or just other things of hospitality.
Wow, that's a really good question. You should ask me that before I did this. Jeez. So I think, and that's kind of what I was getting at with a bit of the posture. Hospitality most commonly practiced is, it's inviting someone into your home. So actually, in the Bible times, hospitality looked most often like a traveler was passing through your town and they needed a place to stay. Most of the hotels at the time also functioned as brothels. So if you were a faithful Jew or a Christian, you usually avoided hotels and you depended on the hospitality of people. You think of Jesus sending the 72 out and saying, hey, trust that people are just going to take care of you. So it most often looks like opening a home up or a table up to someone else. If you don't have a home, you don't have a table, or you don't want to, inviting people into your home feels really intimidating. The idea, I think there's a book out there that I think says, the title of it is something like A Life That Says Hello. And it's the idea of hospitality it's not just being able to cook a really nice dinner, but it's having a life that says hello to people. A life that is saying, you're welcome here. So that could look like greeting people, inviting people out to go to lunch or something like that, or just hey, let's hang out. Being the person who instigates relationships, being the person who's willing to reach over that divide. But yeah, maybe if I had more time to think about it, I'd have more helpful examples. That's a really good question. Yeah, Noel.
This just goes with what you're saying, but I just see from Jesus' life that he invited people to come with him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a home.
Quite literally.
He was always traveling.
Yeah.
But he always invited people into his life to come with him.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you don't have a home, you can invite people to go with you about your daily life. It
Yeah.
doesn't even have to be necessarily an event or.
You know what I just thought of? Real simple thing. You can be hospitable in conversation with people by asking people questions. Right? You could say, hey, in the conversation as the things are milling about and you notice that one person is being excluded from the conversation, they're slowly being pushed out, you can say, hey, George, what do you think about that? Or Allison, if you could go see one person in a concert, who would you go see? You've all been in pods of conversations where someone seems to be this axle where they're really good at shooting spokes out and connecting other people in so that they're brought in. Or you can just talk less about yourself and more about other people. Like you can be, hospitality is it's a mood, it's a posture, it's a life that is really interested in other people. Yeah, Josh.
We're talking about friendship as it relates to hospitality. Is there room for people's different bandwidths for friends?
Mm.
And two, is there a time and place in hospitality to be friends and to be friendly in terms of, like, I don't want 100 friends. I want 5.
Can you reject someone's application for? Okay, that's a great, yeah. I'm so glad you asked that, Josh. Yeah, and I will get into more of this in 2 weeks. I'm gonna name my talk literally "How to Win Friends and Influence People," and it's gonna be about I'm gonna try to get as practical as I can and everything. I don't think that everything I'm saying means that you need to be best friends with every person that you meet, because that's impossible. In fact, I think one of the problems in church world is that we've emphasized community so much, and we've actually neglected the concept of friends, that what happens is that everyone feels like I have to be best friends with everyone, which really just means that you sink to the lowest common denominator of like polite acquaintanceship, because there's no way you can be best friends with anyone. And maybe you feel guilty about having like those 1, 2, or 3 friends that you really click with. It's like, oh, well, that's selfish of me to always hang out with my buddies when I should be hanging out with everyone. Everyone has different relational capacities. That's totally true. The point isn't for you to be as social as the most social person in the room. The point, though, is that everyone does have a different size wallet of relational energy. You need to spend what's in your wallet on other people, and probably acknowledge that because of the culture that we live in, you're more likely to puppy guard that than overextend yourself. More likely than not. And so, yeah, like I'm the pastor of a small church, and I have a really big heart for this vision. I want our church to be that relational oasis. And so often I feel a particular burden to be very relationally on all the time. Like, I want everyone in our church to feel very welcome, and I want to set that culture in our church. The reality is that I can't be best friends with everyone, okay? And a lot of times it's difficult for me to, I'm trying to do that often when I'm trying to pull people into conversations and trying to make people feel connected. And I'm a pretty extroverted person, but I hit a limit at a certain point. I just can't do that. And I don't think that it is wrong for anyone to get to a point where you realize, like, okay, I want to be open to relationship and friendly with everyone that I'm with. And I am going to accept that I cannot have the same relational depth with everyone. I want to have really deep relationships with a few people in my life who know me fully and transparently, who I invest time in. Friendships is just an equation of time. So you just have to spend time with people. And so that's really what it comes down to. So I think spend the wallet that you have, and yes, it is fine to be friendly with some, but to focus deep friendship with those who are going to build you up in your faith and who you can laugh a lot with and, go out and have dinner with, and you're not worried about, like, oh man, what are we going to talk about while we're at dinner? Because, Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, anything else? Cass? Mm-hmm.
Hold each other accountable and call out sin in each other's lives and encourage each other, and how that looks when we can't know everyone.
Yeah.
How do we fulfill that when we don't
That's a great question. If anyone didn't hear, the question was, with our membership vows, as hefty as our membership vows are, part of our membership vows is, will you open up your life, your home, your tables, and your wallets to these people? That's a big, all of you, anyone who has become a member here, you have vowed to do that to every other member here. We've also vowed, hold each other accountable. Okay, how do we do that if, realistically, that's just not relationally possible? No one has a wallet that big, right? You have to think, so that beautiful passage we read in Acts 2 about the church being committed to the fellowship and breaking the bread and being in each other's homes, that was when the church had over 2,000 people in it. What did that, okay, so if you had one person, one family over to your home every night, for you to do Acts 2 with the entire church would take, 6 years? Maybe 7 years, right? There's no way that the church of Jerusalem was there that long before the persecution came. So there must be some way that we can pursue that in our church, pursue that vision, where we are acting corporately and we are acting in relationships that we have. So we hold each other accountable corporately as we vote to bring people into membership or dismiss someone from membership. But relationally, we are saying that's our goal, and so we're always leaning towards it. And that's why I said, realize that you have a different sized wallet. Spend what you have, though, and recognize that you're likely tempted to lean away from that. Our posture as members of this church should be leaning in to relationship. Leaning in. So that means you're not filling most of your nights with you being alone with Netflix. You are leaning in to these relationships. So there's no way we can do that perfectly, but it's a posture, right, that we aim for. Okay.
I was just going to say real quick, about small group. I think that's one of the really important functions of being in a small group is that you have those people who can do that for you when you're doing it for them, and it's a lot easier than trying to do it for everybody.
Thank you, Larry. Great. Anything else? We good? Okay, let's all accept this is going to be hard. We're all worse friends than we think, okay? And being where we live, in the climate we live, in the culture we live in, leaning into prioritizing friendships will not feel natural. It won't. But don't give up just because it doesn't feel natural and it feels hard and you feel like you're a bad person. You are a redeemed sinner in Jesus Christ, and you've been grafted into his body. This is your family. Lean into it. Amen? Dear God, we pray that you would make this a reality here at this church. Give us strength and grit and endurance and deep love for you and for each other. Thank you, God, that you pursued us and made us your friends when we were your enemies. Help us do that to one another and to those outside of this church, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.